I'm here. We have special guests here from Eyes Left Podcast. It is Mike Preisner, and from Empire Files, it is Abby Martin. Thanks for being here.
What's up?
Fantastic. Well, Venezuela is what's happening.
It is.
And that's why we brought in our experts. So I want to show you a video I got from, I found from Trump, and he's actually going to explain. He didn't mean to, but he's going to explain what's going on.
Can't wait.
And so let's see if this works. Let's see. Can you put it up a little?
People will appreciate it. They're going to end up taking over the country eventually, but the people will appreciate it, and they should pay us back. But we have to go in to save these lives. We should do, on a humanitarian basis, immediately go into Libya, knock this guy out very quickly, very surgically, very effectively, and save the lives. After it's all done, we go to the protesters who end up running the country. They're going to like us a lot better than they will if we don't do it. More importantly, we're going to save lives. And we should then say, by the way, from all of your oil, we want reimbursement. We should have said, we'll help you, but we want 50% of your oil. They would have absolutely said, okay, 100%. In fact, they would have said, how about 75%? So, and isn't it sad? We could have had anything we wanted. We could have had 50% of those oil fields. You know, in the old days, when you had a war, it's to the victor belong the spoils. So we could have had something special. When the so-called rebels came to us, we should have said, fellas, we're going to help you. We want 50% of your oil. They would have said, thank you very much. We have a deal. Write it down. Sign it. We have a deal. We would have been a rich nation again. They have tremendous oil reserves in Libya. Instead, we help. We get nothing. We're very, very foolishly led.
So I don't know what you hear when you hear that, but what I hear is he thinks it's totally cool, as does the rest of the Western world, think it's totally cool for the United States military to go into a sovereign country, overthrow it if it's rich with oil, and then we just, whoever is against the people who are in power now that we overthrow, we make a deal with those people for half their oil. What do you think's going on in Venezuela right now? Let me throw it over to Abby Martin and Mike Preisner. Now, you were just down in Venezuela. You have a lot of knowledge about Venezuela that other people don't have. So, am I right? That's what's happening?
Yeah, and we just heard Trump comment on Syria saying there's nothing but sand and death in Syria's deserts. So that he made that pretty clear. He's also made several comments about how he heard from people who were smarter than him about why they were going into Iraq. And he said, oh, it's about the oil. I get it. He said, but that's what Bush did wrong, is he didn't take the oil. And he's even, in an interview with Anderson Cooper, and he's like, excuse me. You see how fast they put up rigs there? He's like, they'll do a hell of a job. We'll just set up those rigs real quick and take the oil. I mean, he's made that crystal clear in all of his talks that is his goal, is to take the natural resources, pillage and plunder these markets. And that's exactly what's going on in Venezuela. Again, I want to remind your audience, Venezuela has the #1 oil reserves in the world.
More than Saudi Arabia.
Oil reserves.
Saudi Arabia. And in fact, this so-called new president, Guaido, he's actually produced their kind of interim new constitution and plan for moving the country forward. And the #1 thing it does, just like the coup in 2002, is immediate privatization of the oil. I mean, they're open about what they want to do really at the offset.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people don't realize is that what a lot of what happened to Venezuela's economy is that Saudi Arabia started overproducing oil and still is to drive down the price of oil. Now it's at like $28 a barrel. It was over 100. And they're doing this on purpose to bankrupt Venezuela. And then the United States placed sanctions on Venezuela. What does that mean? Well, they made it illegal for Venezuela to get a loan. So now they can't even finance their oil extraction and production because they're not even allowed to get a loan from the United States. That's one of the things that's being done to them. So do you see how this happens? And then you go, oh, now the people are revolting. I wonder why. You're bankrupting their goddamn country every which way possible on purpose. Why? Because it's got oil, and you want to get your grubby fingers on it. That's what this is about. That's what this is about.
Yeah, and what's really happening is a U.S.-backed coup, an illegal criminal coup imposed by the Trump administration, and this is absolutely proven to be a fact, dressed in constitutional garb. It's actually, they're using the Constitution. These are the same people who just tried to blow up Maduro on stage
Right.
in a live televised press conference just weeks ago. Yeah, what law-abiding constitutionalists they are. They just tried to actually assassinate the sitting president, and now they're using the Constitution. It's quite fascinating, but what's really happening is they are violating the Constitution. The Constitution clearly is what Maduro and his entire cabinet are working within. The National Assembly is kind of a rogue body that the opposition won an election, took control of the National Assembly, another body of government. And since then, they've kind of seized the entire legislature. They've refused to pass bills. They've tried to tank Venezuela's government economy because they've been collaborating with the U.S. empire and the corporations and oligarchs within Venezuela that actually still control a large percent of the economy. People pretend it's a socialized nation, that everything's nationalized. No. Most of the food and paper products, and that's what we hear about. They don't have toilet paper.
Right.
The food is, mass shortages of food. Who controls those modes of production? Oligarchs, corporations that are still privately owned, and all of the CEOs of those corporations are anti-Maduro, pro-U.S. oligarchs who are working hand in glove with the Trump administration. So this guy, Juan Guaido, no one knows who the fuck this guy is.
And he's never been elected.
Yeah.
He's not elected
81%.
president.
It's like China imposing Nancy Pelosi as president here.
But people know who Nancy Pelosi
And
is.
people
Like
know-
they polled Venezuelans. 81% of Venezuelans had never heard of the guy. Never
Right.
heard of him. Like so when they saw him announce that he was president, they're like, who's that? I've literally never seen him.
And so, let me guess who this guy is. I'm going to guess you know who he is.
Yeah.
So let me guess. All right, because I don't know who he
Sure.
is, but I'm going to guess he was educated in America.
George Washington University,
ding,
Ivy
ding,
League,
ding.
baby.
And he's working for the CIA. Okay.
Ding,
All
ding,
right.
ding. And guess what the mascot to his school in D.C. was called? The Colonials.
Oh.
I mean,
You
it's funny
can't make it
because-
up.
Oh, my God.
You cannot make this up.
I mean, he's from this party called the Popular Will Party, which was founded by Leopoldo Lopez, who tried to seize power before in 2002 coup. He was Harvard educated. So, like all of these opposition leaders, they're obviously from an elite sector in Venezuela. In fact, educated and trained at the Ivy League schools, the same people that train our corrupt elite politicians. But yeah, so it's like, but the main.
Are you shocked at how America's going along with it? I mean, unbelievable. I can't get. Not only are they going along with it, but if you stand up against it and call it for what it is, that you get called a Russian immediately. They did it to Rokana. They did it to Minnesota's fifth. I forget her name.
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar. And so they're doing it again.
It's pretty disturbing.
Russia
just
backed
because,
Maduro.
yeah, Russia backed Maduro. Even the New York Times had the audacity to gaslight us and say, Russia alleges that this is a U.S.-backed coup. It's like, no, that's the reality.
Yes.
This is not a Russian talking point.
And well, my whole thing is, I thought they've convinced me that Trump is a Russian puppet.
Right.
So Trump is for the overthrow. Russia's against it. How could he be a puppet? So either way, you're a Russian on this one. By the way,
Mind-blowing, right?
Either way, you're a
Mind-blowing.
Russian. If you go with Trump, you're a Putin puppet because he's a Putin puppet. If you go with Russia, you're a Russian puppet because you're a Russian puppet. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. Okay, this is another siege of an oil-rich nation that the neoliberal establishment wanted to take over. That's it.
It's a complete mess. Other than North Korea. Go
Let
ahead.
me ask you, because
Yeah, go
someone
ahead.
was asking me last
Sure.
night, and they keep saying, yeah, but Maduro's not a good guy. He jails his journalists and things like that. Is this true?
Okay, so this is grossly overblown, and every time that they say, oh, the opposition couldn't run in elections because they keep getting jailed. Well, it's odd that every single opposition leader who has been jailed and arrested has been involved in a coup plot to overthrow the government.
And trying to kill Maduro. Like one
Yeah.
of the candidates that they complain, he wasn't allowed to run in the
Right.
presidential election in 2018, therefore it's invalid. He was involved in a plot to assassinate Maduro. So I feel like in the United States, if you're involved in a plot to kill the sitting president, not only do you go to jail, but you actually can also run in the presidential election.
I don't know. I'd like to look that up. I'd like to get some clarification
There might
on
be
that.
some precedents here. I don't know.
Look, it's the country where you can say anything about I think that North Korea is probably the country that you can really make up anything about and people will just blindly believe it because it's so closed off and you can't like validate these things. But Venezuela is pretty much the second country in the world that you can say fucking anything about and people will just lap it up. I've had people telling me the last 3 days people are breaking into zoos, stealing animals to eat, eating their pets, eating rats. I mean, it's unbelievably dishonest. This wall-to-wall pro-coup propaganda that we're seeing, and not just from the corporate media, from the quote-unquote progressive media, from quote-unquote socialists. I mean, it is pretty sick. You got to denounce Maduro. We got to do something,
What
right?
the F is that about?
We got to do something,
How about
right?
we got to denounce Trump, and we got to denounce George Bush, and then we got to denounce Dick Cheney, and then we got to denounce what the fuck we're doing everywhere.
If this was about a starving nation, we should be invading Haiti and we should be invading Yemen.
Right.
Because Haiti is by far the most impoverished nation in that entire region.
Clinton Foundation
Venezuela's
invade them.
nowhere near. Oh, yeah, again.
And with the hurricane
It's
relief.
nowhere near that. I just saw a UN official on Democracy Now! Saying, yeah, he went and spoke to all the NGOs, went to investigate the quote-unquote humanitarian crisis there. And not to say that millions of people are not fleeing. That is absolutely happening. There are millions of people in the street calling to oust Maduro. That is a fact. What is not being shown in the corporate media is the millions of people who are pro-Maduro, the 6-7 million strong in a country of 20 million eligible voters that are Chavistas, that are the bloc that are support him and support the Bolivarian revolution and movement and all the social gains that have been construed and constructed since Chavez's victory.
Yeah, and I did want to say one more thing about the journalist claim that journalists are being jailed. I mean, we investigated that ourselves. We actually have a short video on Empire Files about it, where we go to every newsstand, right? The claim is that anti-government media is shut down and journalists are jailed. Well, we tested that. We went to every newsstand we could find, bought every single newspaper that you could buy on the shelves, and we went through every single one. And like 80% of them were like not only anti-government newspapers, but had headlines like Trump must take care of Maduro. Like the headline of the paper saying Trump come and invade and take out the president. That's like freely open and operating. And like 90% of the television stations that people see in Venezuela are anti-government television stations. So it's the pro-government media that's extremely marginalized in the country, but also targeted by violence by the opposition. No anti-government media is being targeted by Chavistas or by the government. In fact, the opposite was true. We, as we talked about on your show before, we had to leave the country because we were being threatened with assassination by people there, threatened with being burned alive, things like that. They pro-government journalists, they doused with gasoline and almost set him on fire and killed him, but he escaped. One of our colleagues at Telesur, the whole team was pinned down by gunfire and explosives by opposition protesters. And the last coup plot that was uncovered in like 2017 or something, the main thing that they were going to do was bomb the Telesur headquarters, this major pro-government or government-owned, state-owned news station in Venezuela. So it's the opposition that's the one that wants to destroy pro-government outlets, just like they did in 2002. When they launched that coup in 2002, which there's similar things happening today, where they launched that coup by having opposition snipers on a rooftop when there was an opposition protest and a pro-government protest. They killed people on both sides. They're very good at killing people in their own demonstrations, just as they are people in the anti-government demonstrations. And then when they launched the coup and they kidnapped Chavez and arrested his entire cabinet and announced that there was this new government, they went to every media station and made them show like cooking shows. Like they would refuse to let any news outlet even report that a coup had happened. So this is their tried and true tactic. So if people are concerned about press freedom in Venezuela, you got to be very wary of the opposition here.
Oh, wow. That's some good information.
And if people are concerned about democracy in Venezuela, you should be supporting the fact that they have free and fair elections that have been validated by hundreds of international observers. It was the opposition that asked the UN to not come and observe the elections because they were working with Trump. Trump begged the opposition to not run because then when you don't run in the elections, then you can discredit them and say, look, we can't run in the elections, and Maduro just ran unopposed, and he's a dictator. That didn't work because an opposition member actually ended up running. So Trump tried to re-strategize here. Now we have to look at this in the context of obviously the U.S.'s role in regime change in Venezuela for a long time. Obama exacerbated that. He called Venezuela a unique national security threat in 2015, slapped, I think, 6 or 7 sanctions on them. Trump, on the other hand, is reinstalling the Monroe Doctrine from the Reagan era. I mean, he just appointed Elliot Abrams. This is the guy who oversaw death squads.
Wasn't he a criminal?
He fucking was in jail,
He had to be
pardoned
pardoned.
by George H.W. Bush
he had to
immediately
get
for the Iran
pardoned.
Contra shit.
But doesn't that go on your record? Even if you get pardoned, it doesn't get expunged from your
It
record.
helps his record, I
He was
think.
instrumental in the coup in 2002. He oversaw the regime change in El Salvador and Nicaragua that or was it Nicaragua? Anyway, it caused tens of thousands of deaths, torture. I mean, the worst death squads in that era. And he is basically appointed to oversee this new regime change operation. But, Trump slaps 63 new sanctions on Venezuela, John Bolton's rhetoric about the troika of tyranny. And then we've come to find out in corporate media at that, Washington Post just wrote an article basically laying out, first of all, gaslighting us. Oh, it's not a coup. It's democratic and constitutional. But then in the same article, they talk about how Trump's cabinet tried to do this. They tried to convince the Venezuelan people that Maduro wasn't legitimate. When that didn't work, they were just waiting for someone like Guaido to carry out the final stages of the coup. It's actually laid out in the Washington Post. It's very fascinating how they just admitted it. And we already know that they would not have done this without the green light from Trump, because they need the legitimacy and backing of the U.S. government and its proxy regime change fronts, the Organization of American States, the Lima Group, all of those entities to really carry this out. But luckily, Russia, India, Mexico, they're not going along with it.
Yeah, luckily. So, again, so if you were wondering what's happening in Venezuela, you're being hoodwinked again by the neoliberals and the bankers and people like this who think it's our right to go into a sovereign country and steal their natural resources, as long as we make a deal with some of the people there. So that's what's happening. And so please stop watching MSNBC and CNN if you want to know what's going on about this stuff. You should watch them if you want to find out what the latest smears are on progressives. That's when you go to MSNBC and CNN. And I also want to, this keeps coming up with all these things. Like, I remember Libya. They go, first of all, I remember Iraq. They go, oh, Saddam's a bad guy. Mm-hmm. He's got rape rooms. He's a bad, so you can't say he's not. So if he's a bad guy, we're supposed to go in. Gaddafi's a bad guy. He's oppressing his people. The women can't, we got to go in. Assad's a bad guy. You got to admit he's a bad guy, right? He's a bad guy. Putin's a bad guy. This is the argument that people, whenever you're convinced by Western media that another leader of another country is a bad guy, be fucking suspicious of that, because the worst guy in the world is whoever's running our country. Okay, the worst guy in the fucking world. They go. So I've had people say, "Well, Putin kills the journalist. He doesn't like him." Now who's being naive, Kay? Look what we did to Chelsea Manning. We tortured in public. Everyone knew it was happening. Everyone knew that Barack Obama was torturing Chelsea Manning, and no one gave a fucking shit about it. And what did Chelsea Manning do? Revealed war crimes of our goddamn government. That's the punishment you get for that. So this idea that there's that somehow if someone's a good guy or a bad guy leader of a country, that makes a bit of a fucking difference about what I'm supposed to think about what we're supposed to do with that country. You've been propagandized. If you hear yourself saying shit like that, oh, Putin's not a good guy. Putin's a thug. Oh, Assad's a bad guy. Assad's a thug. Oh, but Maduro's a bad guy. He's a thug. You've been propagandized. Because there's never a bigger fucking dick in the world than whoever running this goddamn country at any given moment. The biggest terrorist program in the world is our fucking drone program. Okay? We just set the Middle East on fucking fire. But, guys there's lots of guys out there who tell you that other people are worse than us. So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, too, that's just so hilarious when this bad guy. Well, Pinochet was a bad guy who we put in power. The Shah of Iran. Like, this is all we've ever done is gone, oh, democratically elected government doesn't want to give us their resources. Oh, there's going to be a fucking CIA coup. You're out. And the person we put in there is always worse.
Yes.
And always. We always seem to forget that when we're talking about all the bad guys. Like, unfucking real what we've done.
Always worse. No matter when we intervene. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I do want to say that it's we have to respect the right of the Venezuelan people to choose who their leader is.
That's exactly right.
And it's not for us to judge. I mean, to be in America, the imperialist core of the world, and to say a developing country that's been ravaged by colonialism for hundreds of years, that the guy they picked is the wrong guy. Like, we don't know. We're not there. We're not actually part of their day-to-day democracy. But that's the thing with Maduro, too, where it is true that even when the Iraq war was starting, that's a trap they try to get you in. If they were any interview on mainstream media, the first question would they ask was, well, you know Saddam's bad, right? And then even if you're against the war, you have to say, well, yeah, he's bad, but we shouldn't do this. And then the argument becomes about, well, what do you do? So it was right then to just flatly reject that and say, I'm not going to say that's up for Iraq to decide if he's bad or good. It's not up to me. But here with Maduro, it is a little different because Maduro does have a much larger base of support than any of these other people that we mentioned in the Middle East did, do have a much richer and more flourishing democracy than any of these other countries, and is actually a extremely progressive guy, you know, like a wanting the things that like Bernie Sanders like are fighting for, like a healthcare for all, education for all. These are the ideas and the programs of this government. But the important thing to remember is that Maduro is like not a figure like Chavez who's just it's like about him, right? Where it's like he's this hero and like it's he's making all the decisions with a small cabal. I mean, the democracy that we witness in Venezuela, Maduro is a figurehead that was selected by a mass movement that's incredibly politically active. Like if you drive around Venezuela, everywhere you go in Chavista areas, right? So in the countryside and in the cities, you see like a mass meeting of like 200 people like under an overpass having a political meeting debating what changes they're going to put into the economy. I mean, to see democracy at a grassroots level, we can't just look at, oh, Maduro's making bad decisions to this guy. The entire country that wants to be involved in decision making is involved in decision making, debating it, how it's going to be executed, and actually carrying it out. So that kind of when you say Maduro is bad, but we shouldn't overthrow the country, you're talking about millions of people that are involved in this political process. You're not just talking about Maduro. You're talking about a mass movement of poor people, predominantly poor people, indigenous, Afro-Venezuelan people. That's who you're saying is bad when you say Maduro is bad. And so that's what the opposition means also. When the opposition says Maduro has to go, they don't just mean Maduro has to go. They don't even just mean Maduro and his cabinet has to go. They mean that they want to disappear from the political map these millions of people who support Maduro and support the Bolivarian Revolution. That's who they want to push away. And that is fascism, to say that the most popular, largest political force in the country, the Chavista movement, which, say Maduro only has 30% of the support in the country, there's not a single party or individual that has 30% of the support in the country. That's a large number. That's millions and millions of people. That is unparalleled in the entire country. And so that's why the very dangerous thing here that people have to worry about is that if this coup actually goes through, the U.S. uses whatever kind of military action, whether it's through its fascist collaborators in Colombia or Brazil to do it, whether it's their own military, the only way that they can actually hold power and take it away from this mass movement of people, you know, millions and millions of people, is through imposing like a fascist-style dictatorship like we saw under Pinochet in Chile. They can't rule by any other way because they're the minority. They're hated. I mean, they're hated much more than, you know, supposedly Maduro is hated.
And one last comment is that before Chavez, the reason why Chavez won with such, rambunctious support and millions of people behind him in the streets and caused this revolution in the first place is because the regime that was installed before Chavez, this U.S. puppet regime, Rafael Caldera, I think, there were thousands of people being massacred in the street. Inflation was already the highest in Latin America. Unemployment was through the roof, and abject poverty was abysmal. And so you look at, people are using those arguments now, which is quite funny because that's literally how it was when the U.S. puppet was in there before. And not to say that there isn't a crisis in Venezuela. People like to construe what we're saying now by saying, oh, you're saying my own eyes are lying to me. These people aren't fleeing because of this and that. No, obviously there's a crisis. The problem is you are only hearing one side of what is going on, and there is an entire other side that millions of Venezuelans will tell you themselves that there is an economic war being perpetrated by the U.S. government and the oligarchs in the country that are exacerbating the crisis much more than it has to be. And that's why you see, anyone who's honest about Venezuela will be honest about the fact that there's not just some general shortage of food where people are digging through trash eating. There's a general shortage of certain products. And when you understand who's producing those products, it becomes a little bit more clear that it's more complicated than what the corporate media is painting. So I just encourage people, again, that UN guy who went and investigated the claims himself, he said, there is no humanitarian crisis. Not to say there isn't a crisis, but there's no mass starvation. It's a crisis that's blown out of proportion to foment this kind of international outrage. And that's the truth. And we were there with our own eyes. And my question is, CNN goes there. They saw what we saw. Why the fuck are they lying about this?
Why do you think?
Because they're elitist media protecting their own class.
Yes, I agree. We're announcing our live dates for 2019. We're going to Chicago and Portland, Seattle, New York, all over the country. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all our tickets to all our shows. It'll be right underneath there, too. Please become a patron if you like our content and help support the show. You can become a patron for $5 a month, and we give you hours of bonus material. And make sure you're subscribed. They unsubscribe people every day. I'm not kidding. Make sure you're subscribed and click that bell so they give you a notice when we drop a video. It's the only thing we can do to fight back against the bastards. Thanks for your support.